Ladies and gentlemen of the YouTube universe, what is going on with you on this Wednesday afternoon? It is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023, 4:03 p.m. California time. I am, of course, your always gracious host, Fallon from GoNootropics.com, coming at you with the V8 Energy Chairs, ladies and gentlemen. I picked this up at grocery outlets yesterday, and I highly recommend you guys check out grocery outlets if you're kind of tired of the same old with the stores. Maybe you shop at like a traditional store. Grocery outlet is one of these mixed bags, right? It's like you walk in there and it's all the stuff the other stores, they either did not sell well or they were overstocked, so they send them over to grocery outlet, where they await the masses of people who want a more interesting store experience. You know, you walk into a place like Safeway or Safe Mart, and everything is always where it's supposed to be, right? You walk into a Whole Foods or one of these mainstream stores, everything is where it has always been. But you walk into grocery outlets, ladies and gentlemen, and you gotta hunt for the thing. The things that are there at grocery outlet are here today, gone tomorrow. And it just adds a little spice. You know, you want to pick up something a little off the beaten path. Grocery outlets, you know, how many times do people panic if they walk into their store and let's say a place like Safeway moves an item, you know, from aisle 11 to aisle 8, or they move something around in the store. How do the people panic, right? You see the people panic. They moved something in the store. But you go to grocery outlet, there's no expectation that anything is supposed to be where it is. Things that are in this aisle today are in a totally different aisle tomorrow. And it's expected that when you go into grocery outlets, it's just gonna be a complete hunt, right? You don't know where the thing is. It might not even be there. They might never have it again. And so there is not this expectation that when you walk into grocery outlet, things are just going to be where they've always been. Makes the store a little more interesting. You know, these other stores have very much framed themselves out. You know, these other stores, they've created an expectation in the customer. They've created an expectation and the people who go there that, well, this item is here, it's always going to be here. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. Grocery outlet has framed itself in a completely different way. And so be careful how you frame yourself, because if you become in a certain way, if you act a certain way with a certain person consistently over time, well, they're going to come to expect that from you. Right? If you act a certain way for a consistent period of time, they're going to come to expect that, and anything that deviates from that norm is going to set off red flags. So it begs the question, should you be more like Safeway or be more like grocery outlets? The mixed bag, baby. So we are sipping on the V8 energy drink chairs. I've never seen this drink before, except at grocery outlet. That's the other thing, is you get these items that are just off the beaten path that you don't see before. I had no idea V8 even made anything other than that crappy vegetable juice. You know, the V8 vegetable juice that you see. It's like they've been pumping that stuff out for the longest time. And so here is a grocery outlet find V8 energy drink. So we are cruising. Thank you all for coming through. A big shout out to all of you guys who picked up the book Kratom, A Glass Half Empty. This is my book on quitting kratom. A number of you guys picked this book up. I want to say at least 15 of you guys ordered this book at its launch. I could see, all the orders on my end. So that is much appreciated. It warms my heart that there are those of you out there who choose to support the enterprise by buying some of my work, by buying this book right here. And for those of you who bought it, first of all, thank you very much. Second of all, please leave an Amazon review, baby. Please leave a review before this book drifts off into the Amazon marketplace obscurity bin, right? So next time, I know people, I don't like leaving reviews. It's not something I want to spend time doing. But next time you're taking a dump and you're on your phone, just think of old Fallon from GoNootropics.com and say, you know what? I'm going to leave a review for Fallon while I'm taking a dump. Load up Amazon.com, give it some stars. Just do a little blurb. It'll take you all but 15, 20 seconds. Say something nice about it or don't. You could choose to leave an honest review. I'm not telling you to fake the review. Give an honest review. Give it some stars. And if you liked the book, leave a review. That would be much appreciated. That helps me over on Amazon. If I could just gain some traction over there, I don't need all you guys to buy the book. I just need a few of you to buy the book and a few of you to leave some reviews. And then Amazon kind of just, it puts it to the top. And then, the sales should more or less be consistent for those people looking for that type of stuff on Amazon. So thank you for purchasing the book. It really means a lot to me. This book I worked on for a couple months. It is here. Some of you guys noticed the Kraken on the cover. I did design the cover myself, which they say you should never do. You look into author tips. They say never design the cover yourself, but there I did. I put the Kraken in there. That's an actual cup of Kratom that I put on there. I just dumped a bunch of Kratom in the water, took a picture, put it on the cover, and with the Kraken, and called it a day. So thank you guys very much for purchasing the book. It really means a lot. And for those of you interested in the book, I'll link you guys below. It's a good book. It's not like, I just wrote this for a quick money grab. This is a book with a lot of good information in it. And speaking of money grab, I make about $2.50 every time somebody buys it. So this is anything but a money grab. I wrote this book to help you guys out, and it's a complete download of my thoughts. It's a complete download of everything I think about Kratom. So if you're struggling in that area, pick up the book. It's really, it's a good resource for you if you're quitting Kratom. So today, after a long-winded introduction, the spiritual consequences of Kratom usage. What are the spiritual consequences? We all know, there's some side effects to Kratom. You take it for a long time. And I would argue that, I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of people, they'll say, well, moderate your Kratom. They'll say moderate, use it sparingly, once a day. And I have found in the past that even once a day usage of Kratom eventually leads to side effects. It eventually leads to withdrawals. It might take a lot longer to get there if you're using Kratom, once a day in your life, like maybe once in the morning or once at night. I have found that if you scale that out 30 days, 60 days, you'll start to find that you begin to fiend for the Kratom. You begin to withdraw ever so subtly. And the longer you're on that single dose, the more withdrawals you're going to feel. And you find that even hours before you're supposed to dose, you're finding that you're craving the Kratom. You're not feeling as good. So this whole thing of moderation, unless you're talking about using Kratom only a couple times a week, because even once a day, I believe is still setting yourself up for withdrawals, setting yourself up to experience that scorpion's tail that kratom has. So when people say moderate, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? Yeah, I'd say if you want to get away with using kratom in a 100% safe way, one time a week, 2 times a week at the most, right? 3 times a week is definitely pushing it. So unless you could use kratom once a week, twice a week at the most, I just can't imagine that. Is there anybody out there that's taking kratom once a week? It's like they take it and it's like so lackluster to them that they just kind of put it away and forget about it. I'm sure there's people out there like that, but for the most part, I would venture to say most people find it very, very addictive. Even these people you see saying, oh, they only use it once a day, once every couple days. This person is also significantly hooked on kratom, because it is very addicting stuff. Very addicting, and if you're using it more than once a day, you're really setting yourself up to run into problems with dependence, even at once a day. You're eventually going to hit that point where you see that darker side of kratom, and you're finding that throughout the day, those hours you have to spend waiting to take your dose. And that's the other thing. So don't you spend that time just kind of pining for the Kraken? Let's say you do take it once a day. Don't you spend a lot of that time pining, and it's like, oh, you can't wait to use it. You can't wait to take your dose. And that's how I did it for a long time. I'd take my kratom sparingly, but the subsequent hours would be spent just kind of like just waiting until I could take my dose. And you're enslaved. I think it's really only a small percentage of people that could use kratom maybe once a week. Kratom for them is so lackluster. It's like they could kind of take it or leave it type of thing. But I would say for most people, kratom really does that hook where you take it and you're like, holy smokes, this is some good stuff right here, baby. This is some good stuff. So the spiritual consequences. If you guys look at the thumbnail, kratom got its name from a mitre hat. This is why they call it Mitragina speciosa. And a mitre hat is what the Pope wears. So I put the kratom leaf on the Pope, and I figured, you know what? Why not make a video on the spiritual consequences of kratom? It's like, how does kratom affect your spirit? Does it affect your spirit? And I think it does. And you could get into arguments about, oh, what is the spirit, and what does it do? Is it even real? How we look at drugs in the modern day, how we look at these types of things, is we drill it down to, well, you take this, it's modulating certain neurochemicals, and it makes you feel like this, and it's boosting your serotonin, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It's allowing more free floating serotonin in the brain, which is kind of like, if you're a scientist, that's like I suppose the only way to look at drugs is through like a scientific lens. You have to reduce everything down into its components. It's like, this leads to this leads to this neurotransmitter, and that leads to this in the brain, and it only exists if we can measure it. And for a long time, and still to this day, that's kind of how science operates. It kind of breaks things down into its individual components and kind of tries to figure out how each of those things relate to each other and what those things affect. And, this in one way is good. It's the scientific approach. But It's like if you take mushrooms, for example, and you have that experience of taking mushrooms or a psychedelic, and then somebody, a scientist, comes along afterwards and explains to you, well, you felt like this because it's tweaking this certain chemical in your brain, and it's modulating serotonin along with all these other things. And you're looking at the scientist going, what are you talking about? That has no relation to what I felt at all, right? Just imagine you come off of a mushroom trip or something, and then you have a just this like autistic scientist trying to explain your experience that you had through a series of very complicated terms, very, very complicated processes in the brain, and he's using these fancy scientific words, and you're just kind of looking at him like, well, you might be correct on one level, but that doesn't even begin to describe my experience, Mr. Scientist. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your work. But you've really missed the mark, and you've reduced the entire thing to like this very cold and calculated process of deduction. And the scientific explanation for how these things work really does not explain the experience, right? Because there's another aspect of the things we take, and that's the spirit, right? That's how these things affect the spirit, and the spirit is not something that you could just pull apart and examine all the pieces. You know, science, they deny God and they deny all these things because they can't analyze it. You know, that they can't analyze it. They can't put it under a microscope. You can't put the spirit down under a microscope. And if you can't reduce it down to its components, if you can't put it under the microscope and see it, baby, to the scientist, it does not exist. But we all know that there's an internal world that we all deal with, and that is the spirit, right? And, you know, one way you could look at taking drugs is, well, it's these chemicals in the brain, and that's why it makes you feel like this and blah, blah, blah. Or you could look at these things as spiritual vessels, and these things going into you and altering your spirit. You know, you take something like Kratom, and don't you come alive a little bit? Don't you become more spirited when you take certain things? When you take Kratom, don't you become more in the spirit, more social? You like being around people just a little bit more. You feel like something has been altered inside of you. You're more spirited when you take something like Kratom. And on the flip side, you take something like a benzodiazepine and you're like less spirited, right? You're like, aren't you less spirited? Aren't you like just dead on the inside? So these things, in one way, you could look at them as affecting your spirit and how you see the world. And it begs the question, you know, if you take Kratom and you go to a party or something because you got social anxiety or you got this or that, and you're hamming it up. You take Phenibut and you go to a party and you're hamming it up. You're in the spirit, baby. One could argue that, well, maybe that's not even you that's at that party, right? That's the Phenibut. Isn't it the Phenibut? Like when you're at that party hamming it up, when you're just hamming it up at the grocery outlet, you know, is that not the Phenibut? Is that you? Is that really you that's coming through? You know, and you might say, well, you know, I don't like me. I don't like who I am. This is why I take Phenibut. This is why I take Kratom. You know, when you take Kratom and you go do something, is it really you that's doing the thing? I think this is like a philosophical question. Is it really you? You take Kratom and, you know, it's affecting how you think. It's affecting how you feel. And that's how you make decisions in the world. All these things. So when you're taking Kratom, when you're taking Phenibut, when you're taking some pharmaceutical drug, One could argue, well, that's not actually you making that decision. That's some other spirit that came inside of you. That's the Phenabut that came inside of you. That's the spirit that came inside of you. And that spirit is very much speaking through you. It's coming through you and it's speaking through you. And, one could have a conversation of, well, is that a good or bad thing? Is it a good or bad thing? I found with Kratom over time that it really destroyed my spirit. At first, it does have that honeymoon phase. It puts that nice glow out into the world. It puts a nice little glow on the external world, and you can operate in the world in a much easier way, and you're kind of more free flowing, aren't you, when you take kratom? But over time that ends. So it's like your own spirit, your own body actively fights against this thing which is foreign to it, and this is just how the body works. Your body doesn't want kratom, right? Your body doesn't want Phenabut. As soon as you take these things in, it makes quick work at getting rid of it out of your system. It becomes metabolized. You piss it out. You shit it out. Your body doesn't want it. It's gotta expel it in some way. It goes into your brain. Your brain is actively fighting against the things you put into it. And one could say that's the fortifications of your own spirit, not wanting anything else to come into it, because perhaps your spirit is good enough. It's like, what are these other things coming in for? Why are you doing this to us? It's confused. It was perfectly fine before. You didn't think so. So you took the kratom, you hopped on the kratom, and your body makes quick work at expelling that chemical and those alkaloids from your system. So your body don't like it. It might feel good in the beginning, but over time, kratom it really drained me, man. It really started to drain my spirit, and I became dead inside. And taking more kratom didn't really work. Taking more of the compound stopped working. I found myself diving deeper into depression, deeper into anxiety, just more irritable overall. And, you think you hit the jackpot with these things in the beginning, and then you find out that you just can't keep up that ride forever. So you dance with the Kraken for a little bit, and then you allow the Kraken to go dance with someone else, right? And, a lot of people have this experience of taking kratom, and wow, in the beginning it's good, and then in the end it's not so good. It really isn't. And even for those of you using kratom once a day, if you're somebody who uses kratom once a day, you can attest to, in the hours leading up to that dose, you're just kind of craving it more. You're not feeling good. And you become dependent on this external spirit that you need, right? You've kind of stopped working on your own spirit, and you've replaced it with a surrogate spirit. Instead of working on your own spirit and feeling good, naturally, you've allowed something else to come in. It's kind of like buying an experience. When you take drugs, when you take kratom, you're buying a spirit, because you might feel like you're just this shelled out husk of a human. And so drugs, it's like you go to the smoke shop and you buy an experience. That's all drugs are. You're just buying an experience because you don't think your experience is good enough. Your spirit, the way you feel, isn't good enough. So you gotta go buy one, And this is what everything is. This is what pornography is. This is what lust is. This is what drugs are. You're just buying an experience because you don't like the way you feel. You don't like how you feel. You don't like your current state. And so you don't like your spirit. Your spirit does not feel good to you because you're like a dark person, or you're like a very negative person. And these drugs are the only thing that kind of brings you out of that. You know, if you look at a lot of people who don't take drugs, they've got this like natural feel good spirit about them. And I would argue there's very few people anymore who don't take anything, man. Most people are on some type of SSRI, just go into their medicine cabinet and just look at all the shit that they take. I said in a previous video, you know, if all you're taking is Kratom, well, that's not a big deal. Most people are taking things that are much worse. But I'm making a decision that, you know, what can I do with my own spirit? What can I do with my own kind of motivation and drive? And what are the limits of that? You know, I've spent my whole life medicating, self-medicating. And it's like being sober is almost like the next experience. Once you've done all the drugs and you've explored all that, you've dropped the acid, you've done the mushrooms, you've drinking all the booze. The next great experience for the lifelong self-medicator is sobriety. That's the next great frontier for many of us. And you may come to a decision to do that, you may not. But I do believe that these things that we take do affect your spirit. And, you know, if you imagine your life going in this way naturally, drugs just kind of they correct your course. Every decision you make is being influenced in these very subtle ways by these things. And so it's like if you hit a golf ball straight on, it's going to fly straight. It's going to fly straight on. But if you just adjust the angle just a little bit, and you crack that golf ball, well, that trajectory over time that ball's going to end up in a totally different position, in a totally different place. And I think that's what drugs are. They affect your spirit in these subtle ways, sometimes tremendous ways. And you should take a second look at what you're doing. Just take a second look. That's all it is. So that is the video of the day, ladies and gentlemen. FallonGoNootropics.com. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And I will see you very soon. Peace.